My manager looked me straight in the eye and said the words that would change everything. Innovation is dead here, Sarah. Stop wasting your time on pipe dreams and focus on what actually matters. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in his cramped office, casting shadows across his tired face as he dismissed 3 months of my research with a wave of his hand. What he didn't know was that I'd already started building something he couldn't control, something that would make his company irrelevant within 2 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything began to unravel. I walked into Meridian Technologies with my usual coffee and a folder containing what I believed could revolutionize our entire industry. The proposal outlined a new method for predictive maintenance using machine learning algorithms that could reduce equipment downtime by 60%. I'd spent weekends coding, testing, and refining the concept until it was bulletproof. The math was solid, the applications were endless, and the potential savings were staggering. Marcus Holt, my direct supervisor, barely looked up from his computer when I knocked on his doorframe. His office was a testament to mediocrity. Stacks of outdated industry magazines, motivational posters from the early 2000s, and a collection of coffee-stained reports that probably hadn't been opened in months. He had the look of someone who'd given up on ambition long ago, trading dreams for the comfortable numbness of routine. "What is it this time, Sarah?" he asked, without lifting his eyes from the screen. I could see he was browsing LinkedIn, probably looking at other people's career updates while his own stagnated. I placed the proposal on his desk, noting how it looked foreign among the clutter of neglect. The clean formatting and professional binding stood out like a beacon of possibility in his wasteland of complacency. "I've developed something that could change how we approach preventive maintenance," I began, my voice steady despite the familiar knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't my first attempt to bring innovation to Meridian, but I hoped it might be the last one that fell on deaf ears. The preliminary tests show we could save the company millions while improving client satisfaction by 40%. Marcus finally looked up, his expression already shifting into the patronizing smile I'd grown to despise. It was the same look he'd given me when I proposed the automated inventory system 6 months earlier, right before he buried it in committee hell. The same look that accompanied his rejection of my supply chain optimization protocol, which I later saw implemented successfully at our competitor's facility after their former Meridian employee pitched it there. "Sarah, we've talked about this," he said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who'd never had an original thought challenged. "Meridian isn't a tech startup. We're a stable, reliable company that serves our clients with proven methods. Innovation is dead here, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Stability pays the bills." The words hung in the air like a death sentence for every bright idea that had ever crossed his desk. I watched him as he spoke, noting the way his shoulders sagged with the weight of surrendered dreams, the way his voice carried the hollow ring of someone who'd convinced himself that mediocrity was wisdom. This was a man who'd traded his curiosity for a corner office and a steady paycheck, and now he wanted to drag everyone else down with him. "But the potential return on investment," I started, opening the folder to show him the detailed financial projections I'd worked on until 3 a.m. The numbers were conservative, backed by solid research, and verified through multiple scenarios. Even in the worst-case analysis, the company would break even within 18 months and start seeing significant profits by year 2. "Listen," Marcus interrupted, holding up his hand like he was directing traffic through his profound thoughts. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, I really do. But you need to understand something about corporate reality. Companies like ours don't succeed because we chase every shiny new idea that comes along. We succeed because we stick to what works, what's proven, what doesn't rock the boat." I felt something shift inside me as he spoke. Not anger, exactly, but a crystalline clarity that cut through years of accumulated frustration. This wasn't just about one rejected proposal, or even a dozen. This was about a fundamental difference in how we saw the world. Where I saw opportunity, he saw risk. Where I saw growth, he saw instability. Where I saw the future, he saw threats to his carefully constructed comfort zone. "What if the competition implements something similar?" I asked, though I already knew his answer. "What if our clients start expecting this level of service?" Marcus shrugged with the casual indifference of someone who'd never had to worry about job security. Never had to prove his worth through results rather than tenure. Then we'll adapt when we have to, he said, as if adaptation were something that happened automatically, without preparation or foresight. But right now, your job is to manage the systems we have, not to reinvent them. Focus on what actually matters, keeping our current operations running smoothly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I walked out of that office carrying my rejected proposal like a weight I couldn't put down. The hallways of Meridian Technologies felt different somehow, smaller and grayer than they had an hour earlier. Colleagues passed by with their heads down, moving through their routines with the mechanical precision of people who'd forgotten they had choices. The open floor plan buzzed with the sound of keyboards and muffled phone conversations. But underneath it all was a silence. The silence of unused potential, of ideas dying before they were born. Back at my desk, I stared at the proposal folder for a long time. 3 months of work, reduced to irrelevance by a man who'd never created anything more innovative than a new filing system. I thought about all the other ideas I'd pitched over the past 2 years. The workflow improvements that could have saved hours of manual labor. The client communication protocols that could have prevented half our customer service issues. The data analysis tools that could have given us insights our competitors could only dream of. Each rejection had been delivered with the same patronizing tone, the same bureaucratic excuses, the same fundamental misunderstanding of what it meant to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving industry. And each time, I'd absorbed the disappointment and moved on, telling myself that persistence would eventually pay off, that good ideas would eventually find their way through the maze of corporate resistance. But sitting there that Tuesday afternoon, something fundamental had changed. I wasn't looking at a single rejected proposal anymore. I was looking at a pattern of systematic suppression, a corporate culture that had weaponized mediocrity and turned it into policy. The realization hit me with the force of accumulated years. This wasn't going to change. Marcus wasn't going to have an epiphany. The company wasn't going to suddenly embrace innovation. They were exactly who they'd always been, and they were comfortable staying that way. That evening, I drove home through the familiar streets of downtown Portland, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I thought about the startup stories I'd read, the entrepreneurs who'd left comfortable jobs to build something meaningful. I'd always assumed those were exceptional people, risk-takers, with advantages I didn't have. But maybe they were just people who'd reached the same conclusion I was reaching now, that some environments kill everything they touch, and the only choice is to leave before they kill you too. My apartment felt like a sanctuary when I finally walked through the door. It was small but organized, filled with the books and gadgets that fed my curiosity about technology and innovation. My home office occupied one corner of the living room, a simple desk with dual monitors, a high-end laptop I'd bought with my own money, and shelves lined with programming manuals and industry publications that Meridian would never pay for. I made coffee and opened my laptop, not really sure what I was looking for, but knowing I needed to do something with the energy that Marcus's words had unleashed. I found myself browsing patent databases, reading about intellectual property law, exploring the process of protecting ideas before anyone else could claim them. The information was fascinating and sobering. Thousands of innovations locked away behind legal walls, protected by people who understood that ownership was the foundation of control. An idea began to form, not all at once but gradually, like a photograph developing in a dark room. What if I stopped trying to give my innovations to Meridian? What if I stopped believing that loyalty to a company meant giving them everything I created? What if I started protecting my ideas before I shared them, building a portfolio of intellectual property that belonged to me and no one else? I spent the next 3 hours researching patent law, provisional applications, and the timeline for protecting innovations. The process was more accessible than I'd expected. Complex enough to require careful attention, but not impossible for someone with my technical background and attention to detail. By midnight, I had a clear understanding of what I needed to do, and a growing excitement about the possibilities it opened up. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I dressed carefully for work, choosing clothes that made me feel confident and professional. I wanted to look like someone who knew her worth, someone who couldn't be dismissed with a wave of the hand. The drive to Meridian felt different too. Not like the approach to a dead end, but like the beginning of something I couldn't quite name yet. Marcus was already at his desk when I arrived, probably reviewing the same reports he'd been staring at for the past 6 months. I didn't knock on his doorframe this time. Instead, I walked to my desk and began working on what appeared to be routine maintenance reports and system updates. But beneath the surface of normal activity, I was doing something entirely different. I was taking inventory of every innovation opportunity I could see, every inefficiency that could be solved, every improvement that Meridian was too comfortable to implement. By lunch, I had identified 17 specific areas where I could develop patentable solutions. Some were variations on ideas I'd already proposed and had rejected. Others were completely new concepts that had occurred to me while I worked, solutions to problems that Meridian didn't even realize they had. I wrote them all down in a notebook I kept locked in my desk drawer, describing each one in enough detail that I could develop them fully when I got home. The afternoon passed in a blur of ordinary tasks performed with extraordinary focus. I was present enough to handle my responsibilities, but detached enough to see them clearly for what they were: maintenance work, not innovation. Every system I touched, every process I monitored, every inefficiency I encountered, became data for my growing collection of improvement opportunities. When 5 o'clock arrived, I packed up my things with the same casual efficiency I displayed every day for the past 3 years. But inside my bag, alongside the laptop and the lunch container, and the various detritus of office life, was the notebook containing 17 ideas that could change everything. 17 solutions to problems that Meridian refused to acknowledge. 17 opportunities to build something they couldn't control or dismiss or bury in committee hell. That evening, I sat down at my home office and opened the notebook to the first page. The idea was elegantly simple: a machine learning algorithm that could predict equipment failures based on subtle changes in operational data, preventing breakdowns before they happened, and saving companies millions in downtime and emergency repairs. It was the same concept I'd pitched to Marcus, refined and improved through months of additional research. But this time, instead of formatting it as a corporate proposal, I began drafting a provisional patent application. The language was different, more technical and precise, focused on the specific innovations that made my approach unique and valuable. I worked until 2 in the morning, crafting descriptions that would protect not just the basic concept, but all the variations and improvements I could envision. By Thursday, I had filed my first provisional patent application through an online service that made the process surprisingly straightforward. The filing fee was modest, well within my budget, and the sense of ownership I felt afterward was intoxicating. For the first time in my professional life, I owned something valuable, something that couldn't be taken away by a manager's dismissive wave or buried in corporate bureaucracy. The second idea came to me during Friday's team meeting, while Marcus droned on about quarterly efficiency reports that showed the same mediocre results we'd been achieving for the past 2 years. I watched him click through slides that revealed nothing new, heard him use phrases like maintaining our competitive position and optimizing existing resources, and realized he was describing a company in managed decline, slowly losing ground to more innovative competitors while pretending that stability and stagnation were the same thing. But sitting there in that sterile conference room, surrounded by colleagues who'd learned to nod at the right moments and ask the safe questions, I saw something Marcus couldn't see. I saw the solution to our client retention problem, a way to use predictive analytics to anticipate customer needs before they even realized they had them. It was a concept that could transform how we delivered service, moving from reactive support to proactive partnership. I smiled and nodded at appropriate moments during the meeting, but my mind was already racing ahead to the patent application I would file that evening. This wasn't just about protecting my ideas anymore. It was about building a portfolio of solutions that could define the future of our industry. Solutions that belonged to me, that gave me leverage and options, and the power to choose what happened next. That weekend marked the beginning of what I now call my patent sprint. I had transformed my home office into a research laboratory, with whiteboards covering every available wall space, and my coffee table buried under technical journals, legal documents, and sketches of mechanical improvements. The energy was intoxicating. For the first time in years, I was creating without permission, building without approval, innovating without the suffocating oversight of corporate committees. My third patent application emerged from a conversation with my neighbor Janet, who worked as a quality control supervisor at a food processing plant. She mentioned how much time her team wasted manually inspecting products that could easily be evaluated by automated systems. Within hours, I had designed a computer vision solution that could identify defects faster and more accurately than human inspection, reducing costs while improving quality standards across multiple industries. The fourth idea struck me during my morning jog through Laurelhurst Park. I passed a construction site where workers were manually measuring and recording data that could be captured automatically through sensor networks and wireless communication. By the time I reached home, I had outlined a comprehensive system for real-time construction monitoring that could prevent cost overruns and safety violations before they occurred. The patent application was filed by noon. Each new idea felt like a small rebellion against the culture of complacency that had defined my career at Meridian. While my colleagues spent their weekends watching television and running errands, I was building an intellectual property portfolio that could reshape entire industries. The work was exhausting but exhilarating, like training for a marathon where the finish line kept moving further away, revealing new territories to explore and conquer. Monday morning brought a fresh perspective to my corporate routine. I walked into Meridian Technologies with the quiet confidence of someone who owned 17 provisional patents and was working on number 18. The familiar hallways and cubicles looked different now, not like a prison, but like a temporary assignment that was teaching me valuable lessons about what not to do when building a company culture. Marcus greeted me with his usual indifference, asking about weekend productivity reports, as if my time outside the office existed solely to support his quarterly metrics. I provided the information he requested while mentally cataloging 3 more inefficiencies in our current systems that could be solved with simple automation protocols. Each observation became another entry in my growing notebook of patent opportunities. During my lunch break, I drove to a nearby coffee shop and opened my laptop to research patent prosecution services. The provisional applications I'd been filing were just the beginning. They provided temporary protection, while I developed more detailed specifications and conducted prior art searches. The real work would require professional help from patent attorneys who understood the technical complexities of my innovations. I found a boutique intellectual property firm that specialized in technology patents, run by a former engineer who had built her practice around helping individual inventors navigate the patent system. Her website featured testimonials from clients who had successfully licensed their innovations to major corporations, earning substantial royalties while retaining ownership of their intellectual property. The possibility was tantalizing. Instead of giving my ideas away to ungrateful employers, I could license them to multiple companies and build a passive income stream that would provide financial independence. That afternoon, I called the law firm and scheduled a consultation for the following week. The attorney Rebecca Martinez had a warm voice and asked intelligent questions about my background and objectives. She seemed genuinely interested in helping individual inventors succeed, rather than simply processing paperwork for corporate clients. For the first time since starting my patent journey, I felt like I was talking to someone who understood the vision I was building. The conversation with Rebecca clarified something important about my strategy. Filing provisional patents was protecting my ideas, but it wasn't creating value. To transform my intellectual property portfolio into a business asset, I needed to think like an entrepreneur, not just an inventor. That meant understanding market demand, identifying potential licensees, and developing business relationships that could turn innovations into revenue streams. I spent the evening researching companies that might be interested in licensing the technologies I was developing. The predictive maintenance algorithm could be valuable to manufacturing firms, utilities, and transportation companies. The computer vision quality control system could serve food processors, pharmaceutical manufacturers, and electronics companies. The construction monitoring platform could appeal to general contractors, project management firms, and government agencies overseeing public works projects. Each potential application represented a different market, with different needs and different decision-making processes. I began creating detailed profiles of target companies, studying their current challenges, and identifying how my innovations could solve specific problems they were already struggling with. This wasn't just about building cool technology. It was about creating solutions that companies would pay substantial licensing fees to access. By Thursday, I had identified 43 companies across 7 industries that could benefit from the patents I was developing. Some were small startups that might be interested in incorporating my innovations into their core products. Others were established corporations that could use my technologies to improve their existing operations. The diversity was encouraging. Even if most companies weren't interested, I only needed a few successful licenses to create significant income. The weekend brought another breakthrough, this time inspired by a frustrating experience at the grocery store. I stood in line behind an elderly woman who was struggling to use the self-checkout system, clearly confused by the interface and intimidated by the technology. The store employee who came to help seemed equally frustrated, dealing with the same problems dozens of times each day. I realized there was a massive opportunity to design user interfaces that adapted to individual skill levels and preferences, making technology more accessible while reducing support costs. The adaptive interface patent application was more complex than my previous filings, involving elements of artificial intelligence, user behavior analysis, and personalized computing. I worked through the weekend to develop comprehensive technical specifications, knowing that this innovation could have applications far beyond retail environments. Educational software, healthcare systems, financial platforms, and government services all struggled with the same fundamental challenge of making complex technology accessible to diverse user populations. When Monday arrived, I had 21 provisional patent applications filed and 3 more in development. My notebook contained detailed descriptions of another 15 innovations that I planned to develop over the coming months. The portfolio was becoming substantial enough to attract serious attention from potential licensees. But more importantly, it was giving me confidence that I could build a successful business around my ability to identify and solve real-world problems. Marcus seemed oblivious to the transformation that was happening right under his nose. He continued to assign routine maintenance tasks and dismiss suggestions for improvement with the same bureaucratic reflexes that had defined his management style for years. But his dismissals no longer stung. They had become market research, confirming that there was significant demand for the innovations he was too comfortable to recognize. During that week's team meeting, Marcus announced that Meridian had lost another major client to a competitor who offered more advanced analytics and predictive capabilities. He framed the loss as an unfortunate but unavoidable consequence of unrealistic client expectations and, quote, industry-wide price pressures. I listened to his explanations while mentally calculating how much revenue the company could have retained if they had implemented the solutions I'd been proposing for the past 2 years. The irony was almost laughable. Marcus was complaining about competitive pressures created by exactly the kind of innovations he refused to consider when they were presented by his own team. He was essentially describing his own professional obsolescence while asking us to accept it as inevitable market forces beyond our control. I wondered if he would ever understand that he wasn't a victim of industry trends. He was a casualty of his own unwillingness to adapt. After the meeting, I returned to my desk and opened a new document on my laptop. Instead of another patent application, I began drafting a business plan for a consulting firm that could help traditional companies integrate innovative technologies without disrupting their existing operations. The plan outlined a service model where client companies could license proven innovations and receive implementation support, allowing them to modernize gradually while minimizing risk. The consulting firm concept addressed a gap I'd identified through my experience at Meridian and my research into potential licensees. Many established companies wanted to innovate but lacked the internal expertise or risk tolerance to develop new technologies from scratch. They needed a bridge between their current capabilities and future possibilities. Exactly what my patent portfolio could provide. I spent my lunch hours that week developing financial projections for the consulting firm, calculating potential revenue from patent licensing, implementation services, and ongoing support contracts. The numbers were encouraging, suggesting that I could build a sustainable business while helping traditional companies overcome the innovation paralysis that had trapped Meridian. The breakthrough moment came on Friday afternoon, when I received an email from Rebecca Martinez confirming our consultation appointment for the following Monday. Her message included a preliminary review of my patent portfolio, noting that several of my innovations address significant market opportunities with limited existing solutions. She suggested that I was building something with genuine commercial potential, not just interesting intellectual property. That weekend, I took a long hike through the Columbia River Gorge, breathing the crisp mountain air and thinking about the path that had brought me to this point. 6 months earlier, I had been a frustrated employee begging for permission to innovate within a system designed to prevent innovation. Now I was an inventor with a growing portfolio of protected intellectual property and a business plan for monetizing solutions to real-world problems. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but it had happened completely. I was no longer dependent on Marcus's approval or Meridian's willingness to embrace change. I had created my own opportunities and built my own platform for bringing innovations to market. The feeling of independence was intoxicating. I could pursue any idea that excited me, develop any solution that seemed promising, and build relationships with companies that actually wanted to improve their operations. Monday's consultation with Rebecca Martinez exceeded my expectations in every way. She had reviewed my patent applications thoroughly and identified several that could command significant licensing fees in the current market. Her firm could handle the legal complexities of patent prosecution, while I focused on developing new innovations and building business relationships. We agreed on a fee structure that aligned her success with mine. She would earn more when my patents generated more revenue. Walking out of Rebecca's office, I felt like I was finally living up to my potential for the first time in my professional life. And your potential isn't limited by their small-minded vision of what you should be. They thought demoting me would break my spirit and force me into compliance. Instead, it freed me from the illusion that loyalty to a company was more important than loyalty to my own abilities and aspirations. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about hierarchy and knowing my place. But the lesson I learned was different. Sometimes the greatest gift your enemies can give you is the push you need to stop settling for less than you deserve. Sometimes being underestimated becomes your greatest advantage. And sometimes the people who try to diminish you end up being the catalysts for your greatest transformation. Sterling Financial still exists, though its reputation never recovered from the talent exodus and client defections that followed my departure. Whitman retired early, citing health concerns, though industry insiders knew better. Trevor eventually left for a family business, where connections matter more than competence. And me? I built something better than revenge. I built a career worthy of my abilities, surrounded by people who value expertise over politics, results over relationships, and substance over style. They thought they were punishing me for being too ambitious, too capable, too threatening to their comfortable mediocrity. What they actually did was set me free to find a place where ambition is rewarded, capability is celebrated, and being threatening to the status quo is exactly what the organization needs to thrive. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having people show you exactly who they are and what they value. It saves you years of trying to fit into places where you were never meant to stay. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.